blows my mind when people say they would never live in Florida. Like, I'm sorry, it is February, and look where I am.
Empty bookshelves at a local middle school. Parents tell News4Jax that teachers and librarians at their kids' schools were told to pack up the books.
A teacher in Manatee County this week covered up the books in his classroom and put up a sign that reads, "Closed by order of the governor."
Housing help is needed across South Florida.
I mean, there's parts of Florida that I said, okay, they're affordable, maybe I'll go there, and those parts aren't even affordable anymore.
We are the least affordable county in the state. I'll say that. We are one of the most least affordable places in the nation.
Proposed state legislation would make it easier to sue media outlets and target the use of anonymous sources. It has a good chance of passing the Republican-controlled legislature.
Governor Ron DeSantis has made a number of changes in both K through 12 and higher education. He announced a plan to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion programs on college campuses.
Hello and welcome back to Why Are We Like This, the only true crime podcast that treats Florida like the active crime scene it is. I'm David Quinones, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Tomas Kennedy. Tomas, what's up, man?
Pretty good, man. Just trying to survive Florida.
Getting harder and harder. Harder and harder every week.
A little bit.
That's why we are going to catch the the secret trail that our other co-host Gerald Doherty has left for us of provisions along I-95 and try to make an escape at some point. Gerald, how are you doing?
I'm doing well because I don't live in Florida anymore.
Just keep rubbing it in, man. Just keep rubbing it in.
Yeah.
So let's get right down to business. Our guest today is Matt Lech, co-host of Left Reckoning and Literary Hangover. You can find him on Twitter at Matt Lech. Matt, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Why Are We Like This?
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. We want to kind of talk a little bit about last episode. We focused on Florida's junior senator, Rick Scott, and we kind of went deep on him and probably gave him more time and effort than he deserves. Definitely more time and effort than he gave the U.S. Navy in his 29 months working there, despite whatever. We're not going to relitigate Rick Scott. But today we want to focus on somebody that we talk about a lot and is worthy of talking about because he is the moon and stars and the light and the sun and everything for all of us down here in Florida, because he's controlling basically every single aspect of our life. And that's Governor Ron DeSantis. But before we get to that, I was hoping we could have a really quick conversation about the Twitter files, guys. Is it too late for us to break some news on the Twitter files or no?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I want to just kind of cue us up with I believe it was Tomas. What was this? This was like a congressional what was the context for this meeting that happened in the Senate for this hearing?
So I don't know much because I honestly do not give a shit about the Twitter files. I think they're so boring.
Wow. Doesn't care about free speech, Thomas. That's very sensitive. I got the background for you guys. This was the Jim Jordan's House Judiciary Committee is doing the weaponization of social media bullshit and invited Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger. I'll credit one of the former of those guys being a journalist. Schellenberger to me just seems like a climate sort of hack. To talk about how their Twitter file story is actually more significant than the 2008 financial crisis, among other points that they made. So yeah, it's been something.
Yeah, it got in my feed, or in front of my attention, at least, from our one of our favorite people here at Why Are We Like This, Glenn Greenwald, retweeting it or talking about it, and just, of course, injecting his unique brand of blaming
the way he is.
Were y'all aware of Greenwald's early foray into Florida politics?
No, please educate us on this.
If you go to his Wikipedia, there's some stories. I forget, maybe Fort Lauderdale. I'm not sure exactly where he grew up, but he comes from a political family. I believe his grandfather was in politics, and he ran 2 times before he went to law school.
On shit, right?
What is that?
he ran for like city council or some shit, right?
Yes, and he said the city council was improperly using funds. So classic Greenwald being on the corruption charge beat, but also he said that they should just be giving more money to the police department. So that's what he was doing before he got into law, which I always find kind of revealing in a way, a little bit.
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit explanatory.
You're right, Matt. He was I knew that he was a native New Yorker, but apparently when he was a baby, he moved down here, right to our neck of the woods. He moved to Davie, which is just a little bit north of where Tomas and I are. And yeah, sure enough, his trying to see. It looks like he did come from a pretty well connected family in the South Florida area, and yeah, he didn't do that well in his fourth place run, where he got I guess 7% of the vote in a 1985 election.
His villain origin story, right there.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, but it's funny. I just wanted to bring this up because there is a tacit connection here. The person that was I guess sort of the opposing party, member that was asking questions was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and I don't even know, Tomas, maybe you could tell us like what it was exactly that Debbie had to say. I mean, there aren't any Debbie fans on this podcast. But...
So I actually watched that, and I'll say there was one part that I didn't like about her questioning, which was when she actually, really drilled into Matt Taibbi's like profits from the Twitter files. I get what she was trying to do, but it's like, yeah, he's making money. He's like a journalist. Everybody's got to make a living, but obviously, he is working for Elon Musk and really raking in the cash. For this like idiotic like really weaponized reporting that's like very biased. But there was another part that I thought was excellent of her questioning, when she basically played a clip of him or cited a clip of him and Joe Rogan, in which Matt Taibbi was saying, as a journalist, when you're spoon-fed a story, you basically lost the plot. You're no longer a journalist. And then she said, is that what happened with you? Like, because it seems like Elon Musk spoon-fed you what to report, and you reported it exactly like he wanted to. And he just seemed completely bodied. I mean, I think he kind of like nervously laughed and really didn't have an answer. So I gotta hand it to her. She got him.
His response is basically that he was actually making a much narrower point, which is about when Seymour Hersh gets documents from the CIA, but that's, I think, just a retreat into pedantry. Besides the point, it's a dodge, because when you say you can't let yourself get in that situation, he's in that situation, and it's only if you think that getting spoon-fed from the CIA is infinitely worse than getting spoon-fed by one of the richest men on earth, who also happens to be a military defense contractor, by the way, is two different things, and it's the exact same problem. And Wasserman Schultz was right about that.
No, I just wanted to also say, like, it's different, you know what I mean, reporting, from an anonymous source, at an intelligence service, that's like whistleblowing or whatever, and you do your due diligence and you fact check it and you do the best reporting that you can. It's completely different when it's literally the richest men in the world publicly spoon feeding you information, like you said, Matt. I mean, just the comparisons were idiotic, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, like, if this was a good faith, like, somebody asked, like, how would you have done this? And first of all, I think you have to be, clear that, like, Elon Musk took over Twitter not as a whistleblower, but as a oligarch who was financed by like big banks in the Saudis. But I think if you were actually going to do this, it wouldn't be going to Matt Taibbi, who, did some previous work that won awards and stuff like that, but also Michael Schellenberger, and like you would be going to someone like a body like the what is ICIJ, who did the Panama Papers, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Like, you would go to a group like that. But Elon Musk liked Matt Taibbi's stuff about trans people in the summer, and he liked some of his Substacks for a while. And there's a very pronounced Matt Taibbi's first tweet ever about Elon Musk was about my old show I used to do with Michael Brooks, where and he tweeted that, look, about to be on this show where they're giving tearing Elon Musk a new one, and now he will never say something like that because it would cost him a lot of money. Like that's ultimately where, like he likes to act like as if this is, and I think like the Wasserman Schultz thing, specifically, like I think it's worth pointing out, but I like at Why to the Post on Twitter had this to say, and I think this is kind of right. She should have been more specific and asked how many paid subs he gained since December and why, if this is independent. He's concerned with censorship on the platform. He was silent when Musk banned multiple journalists after Files Round 2, including unfollowing Barry Weiss because she actually did make a stink about that stuff.
Yeah, she bucked his point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I think like there is a little bit too much of like, I think Thomas is right. Like, this isn't the people, and like the representative from Virgin Islands that said like you're a threat to the people. Like I think that was frankly exactly what they wanted from Democrats.
That was the soundbite that they wanted to walk away with.
Right. It's much more hard to just make an explicit case that this billionaire is actually a whistleblower. He's the new Edward Snowden, and just a channel for his revelations.
I think Matt Binder's point in the Majority Report segment was I think it was Binder that made it, was so fucking good when he was saying that Taibbi is so desperate for his like Snowden story, right? Which, we hate on Glenn Greenwald and he's pretty fucking cringe, but like, nobody's ever going to be able to take that away from him. He did have that incredible, impactful story. And Taibbi is trying to make this into like a groundbreaking, relevant, like impactful story. And like the baby bird is just not leaving the nest. Like no one gives a shit about the Twitter files unless you're like some crank on Twitter,
Yeah. And even like the Greenwald stuff, there are people that were criticizing at the time the relationship with Pierre Omidyar and the revelations on that. And so like
I was one of those people. Yeah,
exactly.
I was one of those people who had a problem with our crusading 2012 Glenn Greenwald journalist, getting $250 million from a guy who was raking in money by like a business model that was basically honor suicides in India. And like I had a problem with that, and I think a lot of other people did too. A lot of Matt Taibbi's former colleagues, like Mark Ames and guys like that, were doing a lot of really good reporting around that.
Exactly right. I mean, those guys like Mark Ames,
Yasha
Levine, like those guys are kind of what Taibbi and Greenwald are simulating to the world. I think the past
irony not lost that those two still kind of work in somewhat obscurity, followed by folks like me and you, but like not the popular and do not have multi-million-dollar Rumble deals or anything like that.
Right, exactly, yeah.
I also wanted to say, like, this isn't even the savviest way that Taibbi could be playing it, like just by defending the coverage that he did at the time. If he wanted to, he could say, like, when presented, like, Elon Musk was very selective with the information that he gave you. You could just say, like, it's turned out that is the case, and that's actually my next phase of investigation is requesting all the decision making that came. Why give me some documents but not all? That's actually something Matt Taibbi, investigative journalist extraordinaire, is very interested in getting to the bottom of. Except he's not interested.
That's great.
What would that cost him?
It's like a call to action. That's a good, classic call to action. Stay tuned. Click here to read more.
I mean, what would that cost him if he turned against Elon now? He would lose all the Elon fanboys that are doing this thing.
Correct.
And like, look, actually, to be full disclosure,
he would lose market share.
I worked directly for Matt Taibbi. I produced a podcast for him and Alex Perrine called the Tarfu Report. I probably made more money than both of them off of that because I was charged a flat rate. Nice one. And I have like nothing but frankly good things to say about Taibbi as like a boss. And we got along very well. But I will say, like, there were certain fixations on like how he got iced out of The Intercept and Greenwald. There's like that sort of tense relationship there, and certain like things that I'm just like, that sucks, man. But like, what do you want to do about it? Just
make that your whole personality and your whole professional identity.
And like to me, it just seemed like. And I do think there's a conflation between his writings, the sort of gonzo writings on Russia, and whether he actually abused anybody himself. That was, I think, pretty unfair to him at the time of the whole Me Too stuff, because there's never been any accusers of actual interpersonal misconduct.
We talked about Yasha Levine a minute ago on Yasha Levine's Substack from months ago. He has a really great breakdown of that alludes kind of to what you're talking about, Matt, where it's like, that was such bad faith. Like, there's reasons to criticize Taibbi, and that was like one of the worst ones, and probably pushed him a little further away from,
Exactly. I think he just, and I was working for him at the time, and he was afraid to address it.
Yeah.
And because it was bad faith. But like, look, like, you got to address the stuff, and you can't leave it for Ames to like figure out after it's sort of become a slow rolling controversy. And it ultimately, that was why the Tarfu report that I worked on blew up, because he just needed to step away because he was trying to promote an Eric Garner book and kept getting asked about it because he just wouldn't address it. And
there was a solid year there where everything he was associated with was kind of poisoned, and again, unfairly, but like it was what it was.
And like, that's the thing. Like, you look, I work for Sam Cedar, and he had unfair shit about from Mike Cernovich and entire right wing people, like, successfully for a moment get him fired from MSNBC, and that was an entirely different experience because Sam we stayed late that night to address that shit the second it came out, and like, that's why it frustrates me a little bit, and maybe my proximity to Taibbi makes this a little bit more emotional for me. But like, to hear him talk about courage with respect to him coming out last summer and saying, we need to look at and have a more open debate about if we're going too far with this trans stuff. And Matt Walsh's, people should review Matt Walsh's book, and painting that as courage, because I've seen the moment for him to be courageous and he missed it.
Yeah. I think you touched on Schellenberger is in this, going back to what we were originally talking about, which was this hearing. He's kind of he's the Tellenberger. He's the tell, because his involvement is what lets you know that this is a public relations exercise. I like, going back to what you originally said a moment ago, Matt. I don't even care how much, honestly, Matt Taibbi got paid. I don't care how much Schellenberger got paid. What I care about is how much brand equity it resulted in for Twitter, because that's how you define whether something is public relations or not. Did it help the company? And it did. It helped burnish Elon's story about being this, like how you described him, this sort of crusading whistleblower coming in and saving this American institution that is Twitter. And it served his interests. And if you serve the interests of the institutions that you're purporting to report on, there's a word for that. It's fucking access journalism. It's bullshit. It's what we've spent the last 10 years trying to educate people, 20 years, maybe even longer, like ever since the advent of digital journalism, ever since Deadspin was like, fuck that. We don't need press passes to games, to report honestly on the sports. Like, that's what we've been trying to, collectively trying to like inculcate in people, that media literacy. And just watching the clips that I saw, it doesn't seem like even like Debbie Wasserman Schultz is not media literate at this point. She's still, if she's that focused and on, like what Tomas said, that point of like, were you paid for this? How much money did you make on this? It's like, you're kind of missing the point a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one final point is, I just think like there was all this stuff in defense. It's easier to defend Taibbi by saying, look at all these people weirdly supporting Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but Matt Taibbi thanked Jim Jordan with a very obsequious tweet afterwards, and took a photo op with Ted Cruz. So look, God. I don't like retweeting something that makes Debbie Wasserman Schultz look good, but I'm sure as hell not going to thank Jim Jordan for taking this issue so seriously and take a picture with Ted Cruz. Like,
there is a rash of this going on the left, in sort of like left adjacent media spaces, where I'm just, in recent weeks, I had jotted down Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, JD Vance as three different politicians who have been getting praise from assorted figures on the left for very specific policies that they're putting forth. A lot of them are like rooted in like anti-war sentiment, or just like broad, with JD Vance, the criticism and wanting to get to the bottom of what happened in East Palestine. But how can you be this naive? How can you be this naive?
Ironically, Matt Taibbi has become a useful idiot. You know, he's truly lived up to the name of his podcast with those tweets and that picture.
Yeah.
We didn't really dig into it when we talked about it, but I watched the Glenn Greenwald Matt Gaetz interview, and it's
Oh,
clear that
that's
there's
right.
one
We
point where
didn't
he's
mention. We didn't really get into
right.
it.
So I'll summarize it very quickly. He like when Matt Gaetz is like talking about like U.S. interests in Ukraine or whatever. Glenn, I think, kind of is needling at him where he's like, you have all these European countries with these robust social programs that provide such a wonderful quality of life for their citizens, and yet they're on the and like getting that in there that is the end, that these programs don't add to misery or like squash like drive or anything like that. Like he's making a very clear like economic point, but then lets Matt off the hook completely when he says like would we redirect our military aid towards those social programs if we were to withdraw aid from Ukraine. He said no, I would redirect that to the border because we don't want to be funding defense contractors. We want to be securing our citizens. There is a New York Times article from 10 years ago about how when they were doing that, what was it, the Gang of Six or Gang of Eight, whatever the Rubio bill was from 10. Yeah, Raytheon was salivating over the prospect of getting to sell military equipment to have like the border be the new forever war. Like so, he's like letting him wash his hands of the military-industrial complex, but not even like it's a very like cynical game.
And look, all that like military contract shit at the border doesn't just come from Republicans. It comes from Democrats, because what is the Democratic answer to not having the wall? Which of course the wall is like so fucking stupid, but it's smart border security technology, which means like drones, like literally like Predator drones in the southern US Mexico border, like scanning the airwaves. Obviously, they're not armed with like missiles yet. I mean, there's actually a bill that is seeking to designate, cartel and like, drug trafficking organizations in Mexico as terrorist organizations. So you could easily see a future where these like drone technology at the border is equipped with like military grade weaponry. But yeah, you're completely right, Gerald. I mean, all that border security shit is just a giant cash giveaway of our tax dollars to military contractors.
It does remind me of like how in the lead up to the Civil War, when like tensions between the North and South were getting bad, it's like, let's go invade Mexico. And that's like these guys pretending like they're like anti-war. And then you see like in the same breath, it's like, oh, maybe we should invade Mexico, stop this drug stuff. Or it's like very serious allegations against China. Like it's all, really phony. And just one point on Matt Gaetz' proposal to withdraw American troops from Syria. Noah Rothman, I think from the National Review, says, insofar as this vote was at all indicative of a political realignment, the evidence for that can be found in the fact that more Democratic members voted with Gaetz than Republicans, and most of those Democrats are members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Now, that is something you will not see Glenn Greenwald and like the different sort of fluffers of Matt Gaetz and, the new realigners on the conservative side. Like you won't see them emphasize that.
That won't line up. That won't close some. Being complimentary towards AOC isn't going to help the Substack numbers or anything like that.
No.
So transitioning from one potential horrible dystopian future where we have fully militarized the border to another potential dystopian future where the current Florida governor is the president of the United States. Right. Let's talk a little bit about Ron DeSantis. The reason, the way that I want to try to approach this, Tomas, is you had a really informative. If any of you listen to the show and somehow don't follow Tomas Kennedy on Twitter, you should go follow him at Tomas Ken, right? Kenn at the end. Mm-hmm. And Tomas took all of this fire hose energy that's been coming at those of us in Florida in the form of these just antiquated, horrible, restrictive bill after bill after bill that we don't even have time to process them, let alone talk about them. And he, synthesized them into a few really helpful infographic-y in Twitter posts. And Tomas, I was hoping maybe we could talk about a few of them. If you're bored by one of them, say, fuck that one. Let's not talk about that one. But we'll just like kind of run through them and just try to bring everybody up to date on give you a look a little bit at like what your potential future president, what's on his legislative agenda right now so that you can get an idea for maybe what Ron DeSantis America might look like. I'm sorry if you guys hear my voice kind of dropping at the end of every sentence right now. It's because I'm reading these fucking bills and I'm looking at them and kind of reminding myself what's in them. Let's start with HB1/SB 202, which is a proposal designed to continue defunding Florida public schools. Awesome. That's exactly what they need, if you ask me. Tomas, what's going on with what should we know about HB1/SB 202?
This has been an ideological project long in the making for Florida Republicans, and it's really an ideological project for the Republican Party as a whole, for the Betsy DeVos Department of Education under Trump. But really, what it would do is that it would hand over $4 billion with a B of our tax dollars to unaccountable private charter schools. And that is, again, money for folks that aren't familiar. That is public school money that is used for vouchers for these private charter schools that are unaccountable to any sort of elected school board authority, or to any real sort of like standards set by these school boards, or really in a lot of ways the Florida state government, unless specified in legislation. So again, this is just a project to destroy and starve of resources our Florida public schools, which are already in horrible shape, and they're that way because they've been intentionally sabotaged.
Yeah, this one is particularly like to understand the context of this bill. You also have to like think of it in conjunction with the Don't Say Gay bill, which was obviously transphobic, homophobic, and just prejudicial up and down. But if that's what you think it was about, you miss something important. What it's really about is making Florida public schools shittier. What Don't Say Gay was about saying, like, look at how bad, and look here, 2 years later, year and a half later, here we are looking at our public schools and saying, damn, look how shitty our public schools are. Parents like me, parents of a certain income level and above, hey, you know what, guys, why don't you guys, stop messing with these shitty public schools? Just come on over and enroll in a private or a charter school, which was
where the law will let you be as gay as you want, if
right.
I understand correctly. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, I got a buddy, Chris Leal, who ran for office in Texas, and that's a huge dynamic too there. And like, of course, you just have the marching bigotry of it, but this is seen by the elites as a spearhead to take two teachers' unions. And I'm not sure what the teacher union situation is in Florida, but I know in Texas, like, and just attack on public schools. People like in rural areas love their public schools because like it's a civic center, basically, for obvious reasons. And the way to turn them against that is these attempts through different types of prejudice. And they're gonna make your kid gay or trans or whatever. And the same thing with the CRT stuff. They're gonna teach your kid to hate America. And yeah, like you said, that it speaks to and animates those bigotries, but it's also a material attack on a class of people like teachers that can stand up to what they want to do.
Yeah, and Matt, it's funny that you bring up teachers unions, because all these bills are they're synchronized, right? They're a symphony of shit that is coming upon us. There's a bill, Senate Bill 256, that will actually dissolve public sector unions, including teachers unions, that fall below a 60% membership threshold. And it actually also makes automatic dues deduction illegal for public sector unions. And of course, police unions and firefighter unions are
exempt.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? That's so weird.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that could have ended up anyway, but the fact that it ended up being exempt for just them is so random. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's so funny because they consider that authoritarian to do that, but they want to be authoritarian to cops and firefighters. That doesn't sound like.
I guess authoritarianism is okay when it's done to our beautiful police. But Tomas, if anybody has had it too easy I've said it before and I'll say it again. If anybody in the state of Florida has had it too easy for the last 3 years, it's renters. It's just way too easy, way too affordable to live here. SB 102 is focused on the effort to sort of help renters, take away local government ability to enact rent control during states of emergency. Tomas, what's going on with SB 102 that we should know?
So this bill basically stems from an effort led by Florida Rising and Representative Anna Skimani, who's a friend of the pod, Ida Skimani, her sister, who's also a friend of the pod. They, in Orange County, which is the Orlando area, they've led a ballot measure to enact what they call rent stabilization, rent control. And it was a temporary measure, right? Because of what they declared, what was declared as a state of emergency because of the skyrocketing housing prices in the area. This was approved by a majority, over 60% of Orange County voters. Obviously, the Florida Real Estate Association and other special interest groups sued to stop it, and it's been tied up in the courts. But the corrupt special interest driven hacks in Tallahassee decided to just take care of it, and they're putting this state level preemption to make sure that there's no way to enact rent control in the state of Florida. And Matt, I mean, you're in New York, right? So you're in a place that is also struggling with skyrocketing housing costs and rental costs. But do you see measures like this being taken at the state level in New York or
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure like DSA, like Julia Salazar, have been active on those fronts. I've been living in the exact same place in New York since the when I moved here, frankly, because of rents. And I can't even imagine it gives me anxiety to think of having to move from this place because like rent has gone up so incredibly much. And like the one thing like I would say is like all this talk of everybody moving to Florida, one, like I imagine this is leading to certain people to leave Florida too. But like people leave in New York, it's because of that. Like it's not because we're rich people going to Florida, I think, to like evade taxes and retire and stuff like that. But like people leave in New York to go to like Ohio or whatever. It's not because it's, I don't know, woke here or crime even. It's because like the crime is real estate.
Yeah. Jared, we got an upcoming episode about that, and we gotta put the pin on that one because one interesting thing we're learning, Matt, down here in Florida, and Gerald is living proof of it, is that freeway to Florida, it runs two ways. Mm-hmm. And
I remember in the 2019 primary for the Dems, it was like an open joke in Miami that like even if Andrew Yang got his $1,000 a month UBI, you would just notice $1,000 a month increase in your rent by your landlord. Like they would just soak it up.
Yeah. We had a fake a joke which was like the pack for Andrew Yang was landlords for UBI.
Yeah.
Okay, so these first two were I don't know, just pretty garden variety bad. The next one is almost like turn of the century fiction Orwell. Like I really hate to use the word Orwellian, but it's I don't know. Tomas, I want to hear your take on this, whether or not this has legs, whether or not they will actually pass this. And what we're talking about is HB 991, which is a $35,000 fine if you call someone racist. Like that's it. I mean, like I'm just boiling it down because that's literally what.
Just anybody.
Yeah.
Basically, if you call someone
racist, you get you are racist. Yes, exactly. And you can't prove by dissecting their heart on a fucking table and pulling out like a pog that has an R on it or something, that like if you can't do that, then guess what? The burden of proof, you have failed, and you pay $35,000, please. Yeah. So, Tomas, first of all, does this today, March 10th, 2023, based on what you know, does this have a chance to move forward? Is this something that is really one of the agenda items, or is it just something that they put forward?
So this is a question that comes up a lot, is will this crazy shit pass? And I literally tell people, stop asking me that. It can absolutely pass.
I'm sorry.
They control everything.
They have the votes.
The Florida
Yeah.
Supreme Court, they have like all the district court appointments. They have super majorities in both chambers, the governorship. Absolutely. And also they don't care, right? Like they don't give a shit. They're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks in terms of constitutionality or not. They're going for the short-term, reward of the headline. We talked about this, Matt. And if it gets upheld in court, great. If it doesn't, okay, fuck it. Like you guys were saying on Left Reckoning, they can say, well, we fought against the establishment and the libs, and we're going to keep.
They're still against us. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. This almost feels like it's designed to be like similar to the enhanced. You remember the task force that they put together with respect to voter fraud, and it really just ended up being, like you said, Tomas, like for headlines. It was like 20 people that they arrested, and most of them, after the news cycles were over, they just ended up dropping the charges anyway, or they were exonerated in one way or another. But it was just to be able to say like, hey, look, we arrested 20 people for voting. And I feel like that's one of these where they're going to want to say like, look, we sued 20 people for calling us racist. So, Miami Herald, Orlando Sentinel, Tallahassee Democrat, put that on the front page. Make sure everybody knows it's not okay to call me racist anymore, like you used to be able to. Matt's shaking his head. It's a lot to fucking like. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like how you like duplicate that law if you're President DeSantis and you're like, oh yeah, I'm running on this. This is great. I not only did I do it, I'm really happy that it happened.
I was just gonna say, like, I don't know how they're gonna square the circle of like this is simultaneously a free speech freedom guy and also like a Handmaid's Tale style like lawyer.
But also, like, they're setting up a dynamic where it'll only be the elites who can afford to call people in Florida racist. Like, Mike Bloomberg could sit like with a webcam and just read off a list of people he thinks is racist because he could afford the bill. Is basically setting up a dynamic where they're the only ones who are going to be afford to call people
in the Purge movies where they like show you what the rich people are doing on the night of the Purge, it'll be like that. It'll be like rich people just enjoying, foie gras while they're like, and also I think Ron DeSantis is sexist, and it's like, it's a luxury move. It's a power play. Tomas, SB 170. It puts a financial burden on taxpayers to defend against for-profit corporations when passing local laws that serve the needs of their communities. That sounds super anodyne. What does it actually do?
So this is a fucking crazy ass bill that a lot of people are not paying attention to because it doesn't have the headline of like "Don't say gay" or like having it being an abortion ban or whatever. But it's a fucking crazy bill. So basically, if a local ordinance, right? If your like county or city passes an ordinance, like an anti-pollution ordinance, right? And a corporation deems it that it impacts their profit margins, they can basically use their team of lawyers to sue and basically have the legislation be held up in court. And while the litigation is happening, the local ordinance is suspended. So it doesn't take into effect, right? And the language of the bill is very, very skewed towards the corporation, the business, right, the company. So so what ends up happening is the local ordinance is immediately suspended, and then it will eventually be overturned by the court. So again. Kiss away anti-pollution ordinances, to protect, let's say, a lagoon or a river or air quality.
Yeah,
or
I'm thinking of like environmental encroachments down here in South Florida, like on the Everglades. They're always trying to develop, and we are constantly in a situation where we have to pass municipal zoning to keep their hands off of natural spaces.
Or David, something that could be done away with. I mean, in Florida we have per a constitutional amendment, a $15 an hour minimum wage, right? But let's say that city of Miami wants to raise it to $18 or $21 or whatever, because for city of Miami contractors, there's a minimum wage of $15 an hour. With this law, that would be the company could sue. It would be instantly suspended, and it would then be overturned because it raising it to $18 an hour impacts our profit margin. Crazy bill.
This is what we talked about in the past about like running out the clock. If for a lot of corporations in the realm of climate change and things like that, especially fossil fuel corporations, the new language of like denialism. We talked about it before, how it's just like, well, let's just do things that'll let us keep doing what we're doing for the next few years with uninterrupted, even if we don't have to run this full-fledged PR campaign. And this is kind of the same thing. Just throw it into the courts and keep reaping all the profits during the meantime. I want to package, Tomas, HB 1011 and HB 1126 together, because they're two things that I already thought were enforced. Honestly, HB 1011 is to ban pride flags. I thought they were already illegal in Florida. To be honest with you, I assumed that we had done that already. And then the SB 1126 is prohibiting you from filming police officers, which I'm being a little sarcastic when I say I thought that was illegal. Down here in Miami, we have Carlos Miller, who was sort of the first person to go around filming police officers and pissing them off. And if you talk to him these days, he'll tell you it broke him, and he doesn't want to do it anymore. The recriminations and the repercussions on him and his family and his life have been terrible. And this looks like they're just basically, Tomas, they're trying to like just codify it now, right? They're like, yeah, in practice, you haven't been able to film police officers without some sort of recrimination or some sort of penalty. And now we're going to make it actually, legal that you can't.
Yeah, so I'll start with 1011. So it's a little bit more complicated. So what the bill basically does is it prohibits any other flag aside from the U.S. and state flag from being flown in public buildings in Florida. So again, that would basically it's meant as a Trojan horse to ban pride flags, and that's not just on the flagpole of the school or the building. That means anywhere inside the building. So if a teacher wants to put, again, a Black Lives Matter or a pride flag or whatever, like that would be illegal. They would be in violation of this law. And then the other bill is you can't film a police officer. You have to be 30 feet away from a first responder. So that's how they package it to make it a little bit more palatable. But yeah, you have to be 30 feet away. It doesn't have to be an active crime scene or anything like that. You just have to be 30 feet away at all times from a police officer to film them. And 30 feet away is it's a long distance. It's not close.
I don't know. Like I feel like this stuff is so far away from like the normal lived experience of people who aren't down here. I mean, like this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I might sound agog right now. I don't usually stammer this much when we're like going over material, but it's just like.
We were messaging, and I was like letting you know, like I know that like this has been like a machine gun rate of like legislation, and you're just trying not to like get clips, but like in the other, I mean, maybe not in the red ones, but certainly even purple to blue, people do look at what's going on in Florida a little bit like, what the fuck is going on down there? Like, it's not. I wouldn't want to. That's not something that would attract me to go to a place, is the constant like worry that I'll be penalized for just trying to be normal or be regular or see something wrong and want to intervene or like anything like that.
And it doesn't work the other way, right? Like, it's not like cops have to be 30 feet away from you to film you. Matt, since you're in New York, I was like watching this story recently where basically there were like some cops standing outside of like a Drake concert or some shit, just like filming everybody that was like leaving or something. I don't even know what the hell was that about, but it's always skewed against the citizen, the law.
Yeah, that's why like I don't think this stuff, people don't really, it's the CRT and that stuff that makes it out of Florida, because we're all doing like look at, I mean, Cop City is the thing in Georgia, right? Like as far as like the national cop story, and like you talk about outside agitators, all these corporations paid like millions of dollars for that to be installed over the heads of the people. And like you said, yeah, in New York here we got Eric Adams having cops, big pro cop Eric Adams coming and filming people exiting a Drake concert with face recognition technology, presumably, or what they say is like scanning people for warrants and stuff like that. And like that's creepy enough, but also they're creating a database, right? Like all that stuff, like it's just utterly horrifying. And you have like, Eric Adams winning on this pro cop sort of, let's not reform. We can partner with the cops. We don't need to reform them. And nothing has really changed in terms of like safety there, except like you see more. You have people baying for cops to beat up people who evade fares on subway lines, but like fundamentally, like the trends aren't a result of any sorts of reforms. It's that people were thrown against the rocks during a pandemic, and there's an awful lot of deprivation and also like inflation and all sorts of problems. So yeah,
there's something like very very close to like a Main Street USA in Nyack over here, and it's a whole row of like people asking you if you have a dollar, where it didn't used to be like that before the pandemic. Like it is just like the people wanting to criminalize poverty just so that they don't have to see it. And I do think that like among property owners, there's going to be a large base of people who are going to be sympathetic to that.
No, actually, because I know we're reaching top of the hour, but I do want to talk about one bill that I think is really, really important. That I think, it's just awful what they're trying to do. So it's HB 999, and this is the higher education bill. So let me read what it does. It basically bans higher education institutions, universities, and colleges from having gender studies, race studies, interdisciplinary studies majors, and certificates. So again, the Victor Orban model of just doing away with these race and gender studies classes altogether from public universities. This is also where I think you're really starting to see like the politicking of our higher education system. It gives the board of trustees the ability to hire and fire faculty in all of the departments. So I think we all know how the board of trustees at public universities have basically become a system of political patronage, right? To basically give out a position to donors and friends and lackeys and cronies. And then it also prohibits the expenditure of funds on any sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion program. So this is the bill that's going to finalize and formalize the transformation of Florida's public education, public university system into right-wing indoctrination machines. This is what's going to, they did the test run with New College, right? With the hostile takeover of New College. And this is going to basically, that was the test run. This is going to formalize it so they can do that playbook on every single university.
I mean, I feel for kids. I only graduated, undergrad in 2012, 10 years ago now. But like my understanding is like the bottom has fallen out of higher ed. Like it's more expensive than ever, and you have people like DeSantis just attacking it, and it's really depressing. Like I grew up in North Dakota. The idea that we are getting a sort of Howard Zinn style education on how to hate America by humanities courses is just ludicrous. Like the sort of discussion of, say, the removal of Dakota Indians from Minnesota was a very both sides narrative. And look, there's violence on all sides. Isn't it a shame? Right? Like that's how stuff is actually taught in this country. So like it's just, really depressing that the option that people have to, continue educating themselves before they go serve a capitalist is being sort of hollowed out and hollowed out and hollowed out. And I don't know what kind of experience kids get these days. But I used to want to go to University of Florida when I grew up. Like, what's happening to like, all these colleges I saw, play sports and stuff, like he's degrading them.
Yeah, so yeah, UF was a really good school that has, completely, just been on the decline. But you make such a good point, right? Because they are trying to paint, public universities in this country as like left-wing indoctrination machines, and they're not. And they are especially not in Florida.
not,
Something
yeah.
that we've talked about in the podcast before is, especially in South Florida, Florida International University and the University of Miami, which is a private university, have long been bastions of not just right-wing politics, but U.S. intelligence services. And to this day, they serve as places, as hubs for recruitment for, again, U.S. intelligence services and the U.S. military. And in fact, a lot of like surveillance operations and disruption operations against Cuba and other left-wing governments in South America and Central America were staged out of Florida International University and University of Miami. So not only are these not like left-wing indoctrination institutions, they are quite the opposite. They have served not just American right-wing politics, but the actual project of empire. So it's just nonsense.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense.
That on that note, and to kind of bring it full circle to whistleblowers, Philip Agee, the guy who wrote the CIA diary, that was a big thing that they used to talk about in the 70s and 80s. Get these agencies off of campus. And now we hear all this stuff about, actually, we need to listen to race scientists like Charles Murray, and stop like booting them off campus, as there's like a minuscule amount of like actual protests going on. I mean, that it really shows like how far we've degraded on some of these fronts.
I want to lightning round us through a few, and then Jer, I want you to talk a little bit about, like, just for a moment, if we have, I think we still have a few.
Sure, I can try to speed.
Yeah,
because I know we're at the top.
Yeah, I mean, just for the listener out there, what else you got on tap, real quick? Millions of dollars more to do more migrant flights, so DeSantis can keep that going. We've got censoring LGBTQ topics through 8th grade, so that's kind of an expansion of Don't Say Gay. Abolishing the Democratic Party, get me on the right day and I'll agree with you on that one. Decertifying public sector unions that we touched on a moment ago. Jesus Christ. School board members would no longer be able to approve materials that are used to teach sex ed, banning drag queen shows, requiring bloggers who write about Ron DeSantis and other members of the state executive cabinet or legislature to register with the state or pay fines. It'll be a second-degree misdemeanor for a trans person to not leave a bathroom in Florida. Criminalize parents and healthcare providers that give gender-affirming care. At this point, that's an old saw. I mean, that we're only like we're one of many with that one. Permitless carry for weapons in Florida. Abolish all training and safety requirements to carry a gun. That sounds like it'll work out great. So a 6-week abortion ban, anti-immigrant legislation. Going hand in hand with the open carry, there's also a rollback of gun safety regulations, because it's not like we had a horrible school shooting here just a couple of years ago or anything like that. So this is the platform, Jer. What's the candidate up to these days?
This is the platform, the evil platform, and we have a man who is ready to put banality in banality of evil. I will be very quick because I know we're pressed for time. I'm seeing a lot of people freak out over Ron DeSantis's background as a Navy JAG at Guantanamo Bay, who was ostensibly there basically as a crisis management team to try to like make sure that like bad things don't happen there, and would literally like go to the prisoners and ask like, hey, what's been bothering you? Like what are some things you don't like that are happening here? And would take that information back to the higher ups and be like, okay, these are the things they don't want to happen. So amp
what
that
are your worst
up
fears?
to like really try to break somebody.
Empire HR, basically. Like that's
yeah. Just about the cool, and like there's a note in here. Everyone's probably familiar with the this better not be Ron DeSantis doing terrible things with his students at parties. That's the thing that people probably see on the internet. They have a little nugget in there about how he forced, not forced, he dared a kid to try to drink a gallon of milk, and of course, like the kid threw up.
Sorry, but
they say like,
Gerald, I have to jump in. the stuff he was doing at Gitmo, the excerpt from the Mike Preisner and
yes,
talks about him being party to them force feeding people Ensure. So this motherfucker forcing dairy down people's throats.
Yes, force feeding people who are on a hunger strike, basically. That it's this is not a normal man. But I'll say this. I'll just summarize his political career. I am not very nervous about this guy, except for the ecosystem that he resides in now being absolutely bananas. I do not think this guy has ever had an original thought in his head. His whole career screams Fox News fad chaser. In the mid-2000s, he goes from the Ivy League to Guantanamo Bay in 2006, 2007. If you're showing up to Guantanamo Bay on the down years of the Bush administration, you're probably a true believer in the Bush administration. Except no, he's reborn in the early 2010s as a Tea Party patriot. He was one of the people elected in 2012 on the Paul Ryan platform of wanting to cut and eventually privatize, finish Bush's job from 2005, Social Security, because these programs are unaffordable and they gotta go. Except that Donald Trump shows up and says, no, we're going to make America rich again so that we can afford all these programs. And Ron says, you know what? That's me now also. So I'm this now.
I love that retrospect, like thinking back of like what a warping effect Trumpism had. Like how it just took everything in the project and it just like morphed it into something weird looking.
I remember watching the first debate where he was in center stage and thinking Scott Walker's career is over because who in the primary electorate is going to vote for the second biggest dick on the stage? Like, it's done. And then bring us fast forward to now. He basically cribbed the Don't Say Gay framework. They'll deny it. Rod Dreher kind of leaked out that his Christina Pershaw was having a conversation saying that we monitor what Orban is doing, and we were looking at his push to keep gay Hungarians from preying on children, and we thought that was a good framework to use on with Floridians. So I would say you like for all the nicknames that Trump has thrown at this guy, you couldn't even throw Ron DeBurgundy at him like he'll read anything off the teleprompter, because at least Ron Burgundy reads off his own teleprompter. This guy is craning his neck at what other people are putting on their teleprompters through his entire career and just reading off of other people's ideas. What makes me worried is that basically it will be like a straight pipeline to Tucker Carlson's newsroom to the White House, where basically you will have news producers, essentially whatever they write, he will basically turn it into policy, because this guy does not have a will